Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Roll the Dice with Dave. I'm your host, Dave Rivera, coming to you from St. Augustine, Florida. I hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas and looking forward to a great new year. And I'm really excited, looking forward to the new year. And that kind of brings us to what today's episode is going to be all about. We're going to be talking about different aspects of sports. Specifically, we're going to be talking about college football and the playoff system and what we have coming up. But before we get into that, I just wanted to let everybody know this is a pre-recorded broadcast, so my guest will not be answering questions live, but he will have access to the broadcast and be able to check in after it is broadcast to be able to answer any questions and respond to any comments. And I think many people may have some questions and have some comments, and my guest will be more than happy to respond to them. Also, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Roll the Dice with Dave. Can be found on Facebook. Also can be found on YouTube. So please go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. Get many people on this train of let's see the change we want to see in this world. So without any further hesitation, I'm going to be bringing out my guest, Joel. Joel, how are you doing? It's glad to have you back on the show. I'm really excited to have you on, kind of getting fired up and ready to get into the discussion of the college football playoff, as well as some other sport things. But how are you doing, my friend?
Good, thanks. Hope you had a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. hope everyone's doing well down in Florida. In PA, I know it's much colder, so
yeah. I tell you, I'm not complaining. We've been having some really good weather, right? So I can't complain. It's been different compared to growing up in New York with those winters. But I tell you what, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love these Florida winters. A lot of people say it doesn't feel like Christmas or New Year's, but that's okay, right? That's the reason I moved down. That's the reason I moved down to Florida. How are you and your family doing? Everything going good for you guys?
Yeah, we're doing well. Everyone's healthy. Everyone's doing well. Thank you.
That's good.
How yours?
I'm glad.
How's Diego doing? Last we talked, he was, I think, just getting ready for baseball season, or maybe baseball season was just wrapping up in the spring.
Well, Diego's doing really, really well. He just finished his first semester of college at Flagler College. Had a really strong GPA. Just being Diego, right? Living life, doing his thing. May be making a transition in the future. We don't know. We're taking it day by day, but he may be looking at getting back into the football thing. He took some time off, went to a school like we have a joke here at Flagler College that our football team is undefeated. And the reason we're undefeated is because we don't have a football team, right? So, but he's looking at getting back into the sport, looking at maybe playing again at the college level, or even maybe taking it to a semi-pro level. We'll wait and see. But things are going good, man. Yeah, he's staying in shape. He still looks like he's in ball playing shape. I'll give you that. To be 19 again, right? He just had a birthday not too long ago. I miss those days. The metabolism's super good. You could eat what you want, work out, and stay in great shape. Also, my other son, Pablo, same thing, right? They're both in killer shape. If I had the chance to do 16, 17, 18, 19 over again, I'd probably be a little bit more serious with my workouts and look like Greek gods like them, right? So
yeah, I know I would.
So as we kind of get going to the show, I have a few segments before we kind of get into the meat of things. The first one I have is the review, and I have a question for you. Have you seen the new Spider-Man movie?
No, I have not. I am.
Oh, dude, guys, too. It's good.
I have not seen any comic book movie.
Oh, really? Are you one that you're just not into the comic book movies?
Not at all. And my brother is really pushing them on, or my sons. He's and my youngest son sort of grasped it a little bit. He got a Captain America, figurine. We celebrate for Christmas, and I thought it was a flying saucer. Turns out it's a shield.
A shield, baby. The vibranium shield, man.
Yeah, and both my youngest son, who is 5, and my brother, rolled their eyes at me and just berated me for knowing nothing about superheroes.
Oh, man. So I'm going to say this, right? The Spider-Man, and maybe it's good that you haven't seen it, because then we might end up having to do a spoiler alert, right? Because we'd be talking about it. I don't feel I have to do a spoiler alert now, because all I'm going to say is I think it's a great, fun family movie. It's a great movie, kind of showing a good arc. I feel it's a good tie-in to the two before that with Tom Holland. So if people have been following it, I recommend go check out Spider-Man No Way Home. It was a good, fun movie. I saw it with my family. We had a great time. Really enjoyed it. Go check it out if you haven't, and then if you're into comic book movies, and if you're not, I'm sure there's another movie out there or something that you can check out, and maybe go see West Side Story or something. So I'm going to jump into the next piece. Have you and your family done any traveling lately? Have you guys done anything? Have any plans on the horizon? I know the last time we talked, there was maybe some things, but
yeah, no traveling. Since summertime with vacation, it's really the only time that we really travel. With my wife and I both work in the school system, so the school year is work and summertime is sort of play. So that's when we do our traveling. Usually go to Myrtle Beach. Maybe this year we'll head a couple more miles down south and spend the week with you guys. Who knows,
man? I tell you, if you come down, you better give me a call, man, so we can go hang out. Definitely. Yeah, I feel I found a new lifelong friend in you, man, being introduced through Ed. So
yeah, I know. Yeah, Ed. I was wondering if this was going to be live, if Ed would chime in, but I'll be sure to watch it on Tuesday and comment on all of Ed's snarky responses, which I'm sure
You know they're coming, right?
Oh, I know they're coming.
You know they're coming. Yeah, we just recently took a little trip, but man, you would think, we're down here in Florida, right? So it's like stacked. There's so many people around. I don't want to really go out and do much because there's just so many extra people.
Right.
So this is actually a nice relaxation piece, just getting to sit here and kind of talk with you about some stuff. So my HTM highlight is it is crazy down here in Florida right now with people just coming in. Hopefully everybody's being safe while they travel and everything, still dealing with this pandemic stuff. But so if anybody's traveling, just be hopefully you're happy, healthy, and safe. So now we're going to jump into some interesting conversation here. So there's going to be the first one. I saw a post that you and your dad were kind of having a conversation, and then you jumped on me a little bit, right? Because I think I may have hearted, right? I think I may have hearted your dad's.
You didn't just
right?
like it.
But I didn't just like it. I hearted it because it was a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, being a baseball guy, but also the particular players that were involved in the conversation, one being Roberto Clemente, basically a superhero to Puerto Rican people all over. The other comparing Roberto to Barry Bonds. So I'm going to turn it over to you. What was like, how did that start? What is the basis of kind of the comparison? How did this start between you and your dad, comparing two players that, I'll be honest, I would have never really thought about comparing because I see them as two very different types of players. But how did that start with you and your pops?
Well, we're both huge baseball fans. If baseball was played year-round, I wouldn't care about football, basketball, hockey, none of it.
That's dope. That's dope to hear. I love
baseball fans. And when he grew up, Roberto was the man. I mean, we're about an hour and a half south of Pittsburgh, so we're in the Pittsburgh market, and Roberto was a god. And he was my dad's favorite player. My dad has tons of memorabilia, tons of pictures, posters, huge Roberto Clemente fan. As I'm growing up and starting to like baseball, my favorite player was actually Bobby Bonilla.
Bobby Bonilla, yeah, I was Bobby Bonilla day, right?
Yeah. But the best player, I think, of all time, but especially when I was growing up, Barry Bonds. I believe over 500 stolen bases in his career, home run king, gold gloves. There's really no comparison. So Dad and I would just have this debate. We have debates about a lot of things regarding sports, but he just randomly one day sent me a text of Roberto, and it said the great one. And so I get on Google and I get a picture of Barry Bonds and I say the greatest one. And that just sparked an internet debate, and it was my brother and I against everybody.
So you mentioned your brother and you against everybody, and I think a lot of people are taking certain things into play, and I even sit here and I think Barry Bonds is one of the greatest ever. Right, there's no doubt that he's one of the greatest ever. But I think I'm like a lot of other people wondering how much that extra greatness that got him in the conversation of the greatest ever had to do with some performance enhancing, right? So there's always that question people have. And then this is the one I think that a lot of people always like to bring in, which I think you have to ignore when you're looking at on the field. A lot of people thought he was an asshole, right? So nobody likes assholes, right? So, yeah. So how much do you think that plays into the conversation with Barry Bonds? Because for me, he was a first ballot Hall of Famer without the whole performance enhancing, right? He was just that good. He was just that good. This just kind of put him in a different stratosphere with other people. But how much do you think all that comes into play with Barry?
It definitely does. I always say that there's no real baseball Hall of Fame yet because Barry Bonds isn't in it. And until he's in it, there's no baseball Hall of Fame. And, the debate is, the steroids and him being just a royal asshole. My rebuttal to that is always regarding the steroids. He never failed a drug test. There's no concrete proof that he took steroids. We can have assumptions, but there's no proof. And also, the pitcher and the 8 other players were also juicing. So it was still a level playing field, And steroids do not help you make contact with the ball. They don't help hand-eye coordination. Now, the ball may travel further. He may run faster, but it doesn't help actually hitting the ball, which has been proven to be the hardest thing to do in sports, to hit a round ball with a round stick. Now, regarding the asshole thing, he's a jerk. There's no debating that. But the Hall of Fame is to recognize on-field accomplishments. If we're going to, discredit him because of his personality, then you have to discredit Ty Cobb. You have to discredit Babe Ruth, And also, it's not the good guys club. It's the best baseball players ever. And 2 of the best aren't even in it. In Roger Clemens, who is the best pitcher ever, in my opinion, and Barry Bonds, the best baseball player ever.
So you mentioned those 2, but actually those guys, I can brush them aside, right? To me, the bigger injustice is we'll even go to Pete Rose. Right.
Yeah.
So right. So we'll start there. We'll also go with Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Yes.
So a lot of people claim that he cheated. However, had the highest batting average, hit the only home run in that series. So there's a lot of kind of iffiness there. But kind of getting back to the Barry, I agree with you, right? It doesn't help you make contact with the ball. It doesn't. And that's a fact, right? Because if that was the case, we could just look at Jose Canseco and his twin brother.
Right.
Because they both juiced, and then Jose Canseco is the upper echelon of baseball, and his twin brother, genetically identical, didn't do jack shit, right? He fizzled out, didn't end up anywhere, right? There's no.
I think his name is Ozzie Canseco.
Yeah, right. There's no question, but I think the question that does the quick twitch muscle fiber, being able to swing maybe a little bit heavier bat, the muscle recovery, a little bit of distance on the ball, maybe generating more home runs. I think those are the things that are in question. Same thing with Roger Clemens. I actually don't think Roger Clemens is the greatest pitcher of all time. There are guys, if I had one guy to win, I'd take Bob Gibson over Roger Clemens any day.
I was actually just watching a documentary called Fastball.
So,
and they were comparing, fastball and
velocity. Yeah, it's a great documentary. Yeah.
It is. And Bob Gibson topped out at 97 miles an hour, which is a run-of-the-mill fastball.
Well, actually, 97 is not that run-of-the-mill, right? Because if it was run-of-the-mill, it's not that run-of-the-mill. But here's the thing with Gibson knew how to pitch.
He did.
Right. Gibson knew how to pitch, and he knew how to get guys out. He knew how to command the inside part of the plate. He was a winner. There were things that Gibson did, and here's one of them. Speaking of Roberto Clemente hit a line drive, actually broke Bob Gibson's ankle, and Bob Gibson then struck out the side.
Yeah. Right
after getting his ankle broken. No disrespect to Roger Clemens, I just don't see him doing that. Right? I just don't see him doing it. Also, when you look at what point was performance enhancing, helping him get over that edge to help him win maybe his 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th Cy Young, right? As we start to go there, right? So, and those are the questions that I have and why I don't put these guys as far as greatest of all times in the conversation. They were great before. They just reached video game status for me. There's no discounting their accomplishments before. Same thing with Mark McGwire, right? He hit almost 50 home runs as a rookie. At what point was he started breaking down, and then the steroids? Sammy Sosa was a good player before, and at what point? Rafael Palmeiro. And like you said, with all these guys, there's no hard concrete evidence to say, hey, this is when. And I will also say this, that baseball is so hypocritical with all of that, because baseball was pretty much done. There was a strike. Nobody loved baseball. They needed something. What better than home runs? And they were letting these guys run rampant all over the steroids, hitting these home runs. So then they reaped the benefits, and now they're going to trash talk, right, these guys. So I'm kind of like, but, no, go ahead, Joel. You're going to say something?
I do think that as time goes on, more of, Palmeiros, Bonds, Clemens, those guys will get in as some of the younger crowd says, the old heads stop voting in. As our generation starts getting more votes for the Hall of Fame, I think they'll go in. It's just a shame that they're not already in.
No, I agree. Because do I think Barry Bonds is a Hall of Fame? He was. I mean, there was no doubt the trajectory he was on. He was actually a first ballot Hall of Famer from my perspective. Same thing with Clemens, and actually a lot of those guys in that mix were first ballot guys. The question of the steroids just comes in. Nobody knows at what point did it really take them to that. I will say this: I feel with Barry Bonds, we were easily able to identify that 1 year.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah.
That 1 year. Same thing with Mark McGwire and Sosa. We were able to identify a few years.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
There's these jumps because how do you go from hitting 35, 40 home runs to all of a sudden jumping into the late 60s, early 70 home runs? 77 for Bonds, right? But there's no doubt he had home run power when he first came into the league. He was hitting 20 home runs, stealing 20 bases, and then hit 30 home runs. I mean, he could hit for power. He was a leadoff guy, almost built in the mold of Rickey Henderson with power and speed. But then he got shifted to bat third because he was just more valuable there. It's a hard argument, but for me, when it comes to greatness, right? I'm saying for me, I'm going with somebody. Like I'm going with a Roberto Clemente because not just statistical things of what he did on the baseball field, but what he meant to an entire people, right? From that standpoint. And for me, still arguably the greatest arm ever out of right field in baseball history. I don't think anybody, right? It's like, right? So it's not even.
I won't debate that.
But for the other stuff, Barry Bonds is like first in home runs, like first in walks. He's like the first player in modern history to be walked with bases. I mean, you look at all these things with Barry Bonds, and it just points to, like you said, greatest of all time.
Right. Barry's early career reminds me a lot of the Atlanta world champion Ronald Acuna. He can hit for power. He can steal 20 bases a year. Acuna has a better arm. But, early Barry Bonds, basically Pittsburgh Pirates Barry Bonds.
That's a good – Pittsburgh
Pirates.
Bonds,
and Ronald Acuna are like the same player.
Yeah, that's a good comparison there. Because he really became a different player in San Francisco, a much different style of player in San Francisco. But and it's a shame too when you think about it. I will say this: not a player that great not winning a World Series, right? It's like not winning a World Series. It's almost reminiscent of in football Dan Marino, right? For the you think, because to me, tool wise, Dan Marino is arguably the greatest quarterback, right? Then you have Peyton Manning. You look at some of these guys, but Dan Marino, as great as he was as a pure quarterback, and dude couldn't win a Super Bowl.
Right. That's actually one of the points my brother made. Roberto had Hall of Famers sprinkled all throughout his career on his team. He had Willie Stargell, early career Bill Mazeroski, who I don't know why he's in the Hall of Fame. He hit like 260 in an era where 260 wasn't good. But that's a conversation for the next show.
Yeah.
But, and meanwhile, Barry, name one, Hall of Famer that was on Barry Bonds' team. JT Snow.
But I will say this: he did play for the Giants. Right. So, and when you look at the Giants, a lot of people discredit the Giants had a couple of runs where they were like dynasty.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You know what I mean? They've actually were one of the better teams as far as building teams. Mm-hmm. And it just goes to show that it's not always necessarily the player, but also the timing and the circumstance of how everything, because the Giants through one stretch won like 3 championships in like 8 years.
Yeah.
Right. And it was like, oh man, this is actually
early 2000s.
Right? Yeah. It's like there's a dynasty with the Giants, and how good they were there. It just so happened that Barry wasn't a part of all that piece that was there. Right. It just happens. But no, I think with that argument, I hearted the Roberto Clemente statement, but I think those are two different type of players, two different types of conversations to have as far as greatness, because I don't think a lot of people, honestly, if you compare them on paper, the type of ball players they are, you're gonna say Roberto is in the conversation of one of the greatest of all time, right? Because if you just look at top 5 all around greatest players of all time, conversations are automatically going to start with Willie Mays, right? Barry Bonds, Ken Griffey Jr.
Mm-hmm.
You could even look at Mickey Mantle, right? You start right, and not that Roberto didn't have all of those tools, but he's typically not in that same conversation with all of those guys from there. But the one argument, and then you could also rebut from this, to me, what makes Roberto so much greater than Barry, just kind of as a whole, is that there is a Roberto Clemente Day, and I don't ever see a Barry Bonds Day coming for Major League Baseball, right?
Yeah. We're not going to get a Barry Bonds Day.
Unless they decide to designate an asshole day, and they're like, hey, this will be Barry Bonds Day.
Right.
But there's a long list of guys who could fit that day. They could rotate among like 20 players that could easily fit that day. So anything else you want to add about the baseball conversation there before we jump into the football piece?
No, just my Braves won the World Series, so all is right in the baseball world with the exception of the lockout.
Oh, dude, yeah. I hope we don't see another BS lockout kind of.
I think when it comes down to it, millionaires and billionaires don't want to lose money.
Not like, yeah.
I don't think we're going to lose any regular season games.
Neither do I. I really don't. At least I hope not. I hope not. But you never know what's going to happen, right? If somebody had told me we'd be in a global pandemic and locking down, I would have laughed. But who knows? So we're going to talk a little bit about NCAA sports. Going to talk a little bit about NCAA baseball. You can just come through. My son is just walking around the background doing his thing, right? So. First thing I want to talk to you about, because so many people are making such a big deal about this, and maybe I'm in the wrong frame of mind. I think it's a cool thing, but I don't think it's as big a deal. Maybe because this is just an isolated incident. But you have Travis Hunter deciding to go to Jackson State instead of going to Florida State, which actually I think is a smart decision because I still think Florida State's trash, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that, of why I think Florida State's trash in a second. But do you think it's that big a deal that he's decided to go to Jackson State versus going to some of the other big schools that he had deals with or potentially could have signed with?
I think it's when we look back, when our kids are our age, hopefully this elevates historically black colleges to that echelon of Florida States, Ohio States, all those types of schools, Alabama's, because there's no reason that they shouldn't be. There's no reason that they should be an afterthought. They're a Division I program. They're a Division I FBS program. So I think as time passes, he may go down if his, college career and potential pro career goes on the trajectory that they're predicting. He could be a monumental groundbreaker into opening NCAA recruiting wide open.
I'm sorry, Joel.
It's only good things can come from that.
And this is why I say I think maybe I'm at least I know I'm the only one in my household when I talk to my sons that, and I'm like, is it really that big a deal, right? And they go, yeah, it's huge. And I was like, why is it huge? You have the number 2 recruit who happens to be the best defensive back coming out of high school, right? What better place to go than Jackson State with Deion Sanders, arguably the greatest cornerback ever to play the game of football. I was like, to me, that makes sense. I said, to me, it would be a bigger deal if it was maybe the top running back in the nation, right? Or the top quarterback in the nation going, hey, I'm going to go to Jackson State or some other HBCU, because I don't think HBCUs get the credit they deserve. I worked at one for a while. A lot of great opportunities, great facilities, just like everything else. But there's always that, well, it's an HBCU, the competition's not as good, and all of this stuff comes into play, which I think is trash anyway, right? Because some of the greatest players we've seen have come out of HBCUs.
Right.
But with this right here, it just made sense. And I don't think we would be talking about this if Florida State just took their head out their butt and had just hired Deion Sanders to be their head coach when they had the chance.
Right.
Right. Because then this is a non-issue from my perspective, because Travis Hunter then decides to follow through and go to Florida State, playing at Florida State for arguably the greatest cornerback ever at a top program. And I also think if Deion Sanders had been coaching at Florida State, we'd already see such a paradigm shift in football, because there'd be a lot of dudes that, with all due respect to Nick Saban, would be sitting there, do I go play for Nick Saban, or can I go play for a Hall of Fame football player at Florida State? And I think some of them would opt to rather playing for, especially those top guys that are looking at both schools, playing for Deion Sanders. Me being a former football player and baseball player, I'd rather play for Prime, right? I'd rather play for a guy who's been there, who's done it, who can tell me. And I know Saban coached guys who have gone to that level, even coached in the NFL for a short period of time. But to me, if I'm a player and I have a chance to play for Prime, especially at the same position, I'm going to make that move. I think it'll be a big deal when we see that some of those top 5-star, maybe running backs or receivers, maybe even linebackers, other positions. If Prime starts getting those guys, and even beyond Prime, if it's other HBCUs that start getting some of those guys, then I'd be like, people need to worry about that. But for me, for this, I was like, that makes sense, right? This kid has made I think the best decision for his future trajectory, given the total landscape of everything.
Yeah. I mean, you're always going to hear the competition argument. But I think what I hope is 5-10 years from now, you can't even make that argument then. Because
I'm hoping to, man. I do. I hope so too.
Like you said, that number 1, number 2 quarterback in the country says, you know what? I like Grambling. You know what? I'm going to go to Grambling, or I'm going to go, Jackson State. I'm going to go wherever. And now it's, Alabama's not getting, 10 5-star recruits. And Ohio State, as much as I hate to say it, isn't getting all those great recruiting classes, because now there's, 12, 15 more schools that these kids want to play for, because they know the competition's just as good, and my chance of playing on Sundays is just as good as if I'd go to Alabama, Florida State, wherever.
And guys I could see, I think back, like you said, 5 or 10 years. Imagine if we get a second coming of Lamar Jackson, right? In 5 or 10 years. That could be, instead of him going to Louisville.
Right.
Right. He decides, I want to play for a guy like Prime, and I'm going to go to Jackson State. Right. That is like a complete shift there, which could easily happen. In 5 or 10. And that's something that I would like to see. And I feel that this conversation spills a little bit into our conversation of the playoff picture and how maybe it needs to be redone and revisited. But before we get into that, I have another question, because this also came up with the conversation of Travis Hunter and NIL deals. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing for football? What is your thought on college players getting kind of those NIL deals and basically getting paid to play college football? Because I'll go ahead and say it. I'd actually be okay with college players getting some kind of stipend. I was a graduate student. I got a stipend. As an undergrad, I got a stipend. And I'm not generating millions of dollars for the institution. I actually don't see what the problem would be to give them a little bit more spending money because they actually help solidify the future of the institution. There's actually been studies that show the better the football team performs, the better the application and enrollment status goes there, right? So there's
no one's applying to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Except those really smart kids.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to do engineering. I'm going to go. Yeah. But let's look at, we'll do this, right? Because I grew up in the 80s. The University of Miami, when they were winning national titles, their applications went not because they were like, oh man, they got some good programs there, because their football team was kicking everybody's ass up and down the field, and everybody wanted to wear the orange and green. That was just it. So what are your thoughts on NIL? Do you think that's a good or a bad thing for college football?
I am indifferent. I think they definitely should be getting some sort of stipend. But I think it would be better served if it was from the university or from the NCAA. Now, the issue there comes, how much do you give and why? So, CJ Stroud, he obviously is bringing more people into the horseshoe than the kid on the lacrosse team. How do you justify giving CJ Stroud X but only giving the kid on the lacrosse team really? So that's where I don't know. I don't have an answer on that end of it. But what I would much rather see it be paid by the college and university or the NCAA, because having kids being able to just go out and get their own deals, broker their own deals, that could be a very slippery slope. So I'm indifferent. I'll say that.
Well, and you mentioned a slippery slope. I feel the conversation already kind of started on that slippery slope, because the first thing everybody said, well, the only reason Travis Hunter went to Jackson State was because Barstools and Prime have a relationship, so they're paying him $1.5 million. And the first thing Prime said is, man, we don't have any money like that to. Right. I think the kid made the best decision for his professional career trajectory. I'm a even any kind of defensive back. Why would you not want to be able to, even if it's just sit and talk with Prime, right? Just to have that conversation. But no, I agree with you. It's I don't know the answer. Right? I think they should get something. I would rather see it kind of coming from the institution, but I agree with you. I mean, here you have a lacrosse player, and that's a good example to use because I'm the faculty advisor here at Flagler College for the lacrosse team. How much do we give the lacrosse players versus a basketball player,
right?
Versus a soccer player,
right? And those student athletes are on athletic scholarships also.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about soccer, but the best women's soccer player at school X, top recruit and and name any sport, not other than football or basketball, top recruit in the country. Every team, every school wants, this soccer player, this swimmer, this diver, whatever, this gymnast. How do you justify paying them less than the football player? You can't, because in their sport, they were the golden ticket, the prized recruit. How do you justify paying less?
No, that's a great point there that you bring up from that aspect, which kind of leads me into the next piece. We're going to be talking a little about the playoff, right? Because a lot of these schools get a lot of money for making it. I mean, it's even the sucky schools, right? And I'm going to go ahead and pick on my alma mater. I went to the University of South Carolina. We're in the SEC. We have a 2 out of 4 chance of getting some major dollars. Mm-hmm. Because Georgia and Alabama are in the playoff, that even by not being in the playoff, they win.
Yep.
There's money that trickles down to the rest of the conference, right?
Yep.
So we benefit, which leads to talking into, you and I kind of having this conversation, which led to the talk today. The current playoff situation, what are your thoughts on it? Is it good? Is it bad? What do you think about it from that standpoint of not just the 4 teams, but what do you think are the benefits, and what do you think are the drawbacks to the current playoff system?
Well, speaking for this year, it's really hard for me. Really, really hard for me. But I have to root for the team up north. I have to. I will not say them by name. They were. I will not mention their name, but I have to root for them because it makes Ohio State look better. It makes the Big Ten look better. And Ohio State's getting money if they win one game, and they get a lot more money if they win 2 games. And I hate so much that I have to root for them.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I was recently having a conversation with somebody, and they said, well, a playoff system is already kind of in place. And I said, not really. And they said, well, you have the 4. And they said, then you have the conference championship games. And I said, no, not really. I said, those are not really playoffs, because if that was a true playoff, Georgia losing, they should be out of the conversation. Right. That should be it, right? Playoff means you lose, you go home.
Right.
There is no in between. You lose, you go home. And I'm for that. I think the current playoff system is flawed because there are certain schools that the NCAA has a vested interest in to see be successful. Mm-hmm. And out of respect for you, I'm not going to mention the team up north, but that's one of those schools.
Oh yeah,
right. That's one of those schools. That's one of the big money trains. Another one is Texas, right? That's the NCAA pushes a lot into Texas. That if the NCAA could truly, completely rig a system, you'd see the school from the north, Alabama, Texas, and probably your USC out west.
Yep.
Right?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Right? Because that money train of those schools, logos, emblems, sales, that would be ideal if they could make that happen. And I feel because of the current playoff system the way it is, where they say, oh, yeah, we have all these numbers, but we also have this panel of people that decides who gets to stay in it, which is why I feel Alabama has made it a certain number of times in when I didn't feel that they deserve to be in.
Right.
But as a result, and then once you get in, anything can happen, right? And if they happen to win, great. But once you get in, you have a 1 in 4 chance of winning it, which is a lot better than if it was a much bigger playoff system in place there. But that's why I don't like the current playoff system as is.
Now, if you take the money out of the equation, what I think the ideal playoff situation would be, if you win your conference and you're one of the Power 5 conferences, you're in.
Sure.
And if then you take 3 at-large teams, the top 4 teams, which have to be a conference winner, one of the Power 5s, if you win your conference, so basically whoever wins the Pac-12, they're the 5th seed.
Mm-hmm. They're the 5th seed.
But the top 4 get an extra home game. Now after that week's over, you're down to 4 teams. Now you have what our current playoff system is.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. And here's what I say, right? And I'm going to use your team as an example. They lose the conference championship, right? And now
actually, we didn't even make the conference champion.
Oh, that's right, because that's right. My bad. That's right.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me that we lost.
My bad. I did not mean that. I did not mean that. That's right. But I think Ohio State should be in the playoff conversation. I think they should be, especially the way they've played throughout the season. They should be one of those teams in the conversation, at least to have a chance.
Right.
Because when you look at it, this system works football-wise beyond D1 with multiple teams, multiple weeks. It works. And the current system is really based all on money, how much money generation can be there. And as much as I say, or if I try to convince a group of people, we need to boycott this, they're not going to get millions of people to not turn on the TV, right? Especially me, if my alma mater were in the playoff hunt, and I could have promised everybody, yep, I'm going to boycott it this year. But South Carolina all of a sudden becomes one of those 4 teams. I'm sorry, bro. I'm trying to go to TV. I'm trying to buy plane tickets. I'm trying to go to the game because I don't know when this might happen again.
Right.
So,
and that's the no one's going to boycott it. No one's going to say, oh, they just want Alabama to get in. It's not going to happen. I have a friend who said, oh, I'm not watching it this year. Yeah, you are, dude.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I even said that, right? I sat there and I was like, God, Alabama again and Georgia. It's like, man, I already know who's going to win. I ain't going to watch it. But no, I am.
Right.
I am going to be sitting there watching. I'm going to turn it on, going to see kind of how this all plays out. So you actually gave us a good segue into the next piece. So the matchups, right? The matchups are pretty interesting. I feel bad saying this, but I feel like an episode of Sesame Street. One of these kids is doing their own thing. One of these kids does not belong.
Right.
And I feel it's Cincinnati.
They don't belong.
Right. And I feel bad saying that because they performed, but I feel it's a different level of performance. I feel that they do not belong in this conversation.
They played,
but they are.
They played one ranked team all season, Notre Dame.
Yeah.
That was the only ranked team. And Houston. I think Houston finished in the college football playoff ranking at like 21.
Yeah.
But they don't belong.
But to me, it's like, and I'm even going to say Notre Dame.
Right.
I always feel Notre Dame is that team that's another one of those teams. Money, right? The money wise. They're still independent, like, oh, we got to make sure Notre Dame looks good and we get them on. But I always feel when it comes, at least it's not the Notre Dame of the 80s, like when I grew up, that they played with the University of Miami teams and they played, right? And they beat down teams and put in work. This is not the same Notre Dame, not even close. No. Because you almost have that feeling that every time Notre Dame is in the conversation and then you see them play a big game, they get smacked. And you're just kind of like,
same Notre Dame.
Right? Same Notre Dame.
Yep.
So what's coming up, right? So I'm gonna be respectful, and I'm sorry I made the mistake before about the conference championship game. I'm so sorry about that. But you have the team from the North against Georgia.
Yep.
What do you think about that game?
I mean, Georgia they're a running back by committee. They don't have a single 1,000-yard rusher, but they have a 600-yard rusher, a 700-yard rusher, and a 300-yard rusher. They don't have a single 1,000-yard receiver, but they have one with almost 800. Their tight end, Bowers, they have 450 some, I believe. With their 2 wide receivers, they spread the ball around. It's not just you got to lock down whoever. So they're hard to match up against because they can pack you so many different ways. The team up north, they're going to put the ball on the ground, which is another reason why I can't stand that team. They run the ball way too damn much. It's boring. It puts you to sleep. Their coach complains about every call. I literally saw him complaining about it opening kickoff. He complained for a hold. But they're going to put it on the ground. Hassan Haskins, I want to say I know he has over 1,000, but I believe he has like 1,300 or 1,400 yards rushing, 20, I believe I read, 20 touchdowns. And then another running back they have has over 10 touchdowns and close to 1,000 yards. I want to say he's like 950-ish. So they're going to try to beat you on the ground. Georgia's going to spread the ball around, spread the wealth around. I believe. Let me look here because I also have a FanDuel account that my wife asks, "How much money did you lose this week?"
How much money you got?
So I believe, yeah. I did see it somewhere. I can't find it now, but I want to say the team up north is. They're 6.5 point underdogs.
Is it 6.5? Okay. 6.5.
So I think they'll cover. I need them to win, but I don't think they'll win. I think
here's a crazy thing. This is one of those things that I'm almost indifferent, but I feel like I have to root for Georgia, right? Being a South Carolina guy, because it just benefits South Carolina. Because then at the end of the day, it helps with exposure, it helps with funds coming into the program. It helps with, we were a mediocre team, but we were in the same division as the national title holder, right? So there's a lot there that goes into it. I have a good friend who's a Team Up North fan, right? He's always like just throwing it out there, and I love throwing it in his face that they've lost to South Carolina 3 of the last 4 times that they've played, when they have been supposedly the much better team. He posted a great pic hyping up the team from the North, and of course I comment Jadeveon Clowney smacking their running back in the head, right? So I love throwing it in his face that at least I went to the school that I cheer for and he didn't go to, right? I love messing with people, especially from that school up north. I love. This is one of those, I just think it depends on how they feel. Like if they come out and they feel they can win, they will give themselves a chance to win. But I also feel that Harbaugh always has an uncanny ability to mess stuff up as a coach.
Yes.
I feel he has an uncanny because I know you're an Ohio State guy, but I felt there have been years where that team actually had a better team and his coaching put them in positions to lose the game, and then they lost the game, right? Urban Meyer, right? So I'm going to bring up Urban Meyer because he was at Ohio State, but what was he, like 7-0 against? He didn't lose to Michigan.
No, this was the first year, I believe, in 11 years.
11 years, right? But under Urban Meyer, I mean, he would like smack the Michigan coaches around, and then it was always, well, next year, right? Next year, we got the team this year. And there were a couple of times I was like, ooh, their team actually does look better than Ohio State's team. And I always felt Harbaugh was that guy that overcoached the moment. And I feel this is one of those moments that he may be feeling it and maybe overcoach the moment and almost coach his team out of the game. Coach his team out of the game. That's just based on his track record. I mean, he did in the NFL. Right, he's doing it. It's not like he's got a track record of just coaching them out of it. And I feel bad for my boy, but then I would be like, that's what you kind of expect from Michigan, or that's kind of par for the course right now, right?
Right.
So, in this game, I'm taking Georgia. I think Georgia is going to win, and I think it's going to be a field goal. Right, I think it's going to be a field goal. I think it's going to be close, but I think there are going to be a couple of plays coaching wise that Harbaugh is just going to screw the pooch and on it again, and Georgia will win the game just because I feel they have the better athletes on the field.
Yeah. Right. And you had said about your buddy who's a fan of them. You don't need that type of negativity in your life, man. you don't need that.
That's crazy, bro. Because always, I feel that only a Michigan fan could find a way to yell "Go Blue" when they go 0-13, right? That's
right. Yeah. I do have a couple friends who they're fans of that team up north, and honest to God, man, the game wasn't over for 20 seconds, and my phone is blowing up. I'll make sure he watches this, but Trey, a guy I coached with, he puts right on my Facebook, finally. I mean, I don't even know if they went off air yet, and he's just blowing up my phone. And, but it's just that one still stings because I know if Ohio State wins that game, they're the number 2 seed. And
then they're in the play.
And they're the national champion. I firmly believe they're the national champion. And I'm not saying they deserve to win that game because Ohio State played awful, absolutely awful. But I think you play that game 10 times. That's the one time.
Oh, man. He's like, that's the one time they lose.
Yes.
And it's funny you say that you feel so secure. As secure as Ohio State felt that year against Clemson? Ohio State was pretty confident that year too, man.
And they got beat like they stole something.
But I will say this, but that was the year that Justin Fields got hurt, that he got speared, right? That was when he got speared in the back. Did he come out the game that game? So I feel that changed. Yeah, I felt that changed the dynamic of the game a little bit. Best against best in a game, you always love to see. You hate when a guy goes down, but it is what it is, right? That's why I think the system is flawed, because as much as I hate the idea, it's like, please, really, dude. Ohio State lost, that's it. But I still think they deserved a shot to make a run, because not to compare to the NFL, but you look at the NFL, you got some teams that have 500 records. Right. So I'm going to use the year the Giants, the second time the Giants beat the Patriots.
Yep.
They were like 8-8, made the playoffs, and then they made a run, and then they won the Super Bowl, and you're just kind of like, oh, right. So any team with a shot, you give them a shot, they can make that run. And Ohio State, I will agree with you there. They had such a good year. They lost the conference championship. It's not like I know, man. I'm sorry, dude. But to me, that was the conference championship, right? That was the conference champion. I mean, let's be honest. That was the conference championship game. That's why I keep saying they lost the conference championship, right? They
did. Yeah, that was the Big Ten championship.
That was the game. That was the game. And it's a shame that game made the determination whether a team was going to get into the playoff or not, based when you look at the body of work that was done. That should have maybe dropped them down in the standings, but it shouldn't have kicked them out of the conversation of contention, because I agree with you. They do have a team that could compete for a national title. I agree with you there wholeheartedly. But it's a shame that one game they're like, oh, sorry, too bad, right?
The game that actually did it was the loss to Oregon. If they don't lose to Oregon, week 3 or 4, whatever it was. You know what? Yeah. They might be the 4 seed now.
And I think they would be the 4 seed if they don't lose to Oregon that game. Yeah, I do agree with you there. So let's go ahead and shift over to the next matchup. I don't even know why we're going to have this conversation, because I feel it's a no-brainer. Alabama, Cincinnati. I think, what's the spread on that one? It's got to be like 14, 15.
13 and a half.
13 and a half. So
already put money on Alabama to cover. It's not going to be close.
Yeah, I don't even think it's going to be close. I really think it's going to be a blowout. Unfortunate for Cincinnati. I almost feel bad for Cincinnati fans and Cincinnati players and team, but they are just I feel completely outmatched, outgunned. But you never know, right? That's why you play the game and you don't play it on paper. But I don't think it matters where they're going to play this game. They could play it on the moon, and it would be an Alabama win.
Yeah, Bryce Young is just going to go off on them. And for any of you fans or people listening, will this play before the games or after?
Oh yeah, because it's going to play next Tuesday, so it's going to definitely be before the games. It'll be getting to the week before all the major bowls start happening that Friday next week. Right?
So I just said, I'm predicting Michigan. I'm predicting that team up north.
I was like, can't say it. No, don't say it.
That team up north and Alabama to cover. So anyone listening, go right now and put money on Georgia and Cincinnati, because if I'm picking them to cover, that means they ain't covering.
Oh man, look at that's great. That's great. So
Alabama's just going to smack them around.
No, I agree. So that takes us to the national title game. So we have a couple of different scenarios. Both of us have Alabama in the national title game. So if it's Alabama, Georgia, who do you got?
Alabama.
Really? See, I don't think Bama could take them a second. Like, I feel, how sometimes they say it's hard to beat that team the second time. It's even harder to beat them the third time. I feel this might be that situation that if Bama, Georgia go head up again, I feel Georgia could pull that out. If it ends up Bama, Michigan, I feel it's Bama again, because I feel at some point Harbaugh coaches himself out of.
He's going to remember that he's Jim Harbaugh. I don't even know which one he is, but he's going to remember who he is. He's going to realize, you know what, I got to screw this up.
Yeah, it's just going to happen, right? But no. So you got Bama beating Georgia if Georgia makes it. Why do you feel so confident about Bama putting in that work on them?
Bryce Young is just a different. I live in the Pittsburgh market, and a lot of people were upset that Kenny Pickett didn't win the Heisman, and it wasn't even close who the better player was.
It's that emotional tie, though. A lot of people get so
Yes.
emotionally invested, and they can't separate like truth from emotion.
Right. And like I tried to have the debates with people, but sometimes you just can't argue with that emotion. And it's just Bryce Young is a different type of quarterback. Now, that being said, I will be rooting for Georgia because my aunt Peggy is a Georgia fan.
She's okay.
So I'll be rooting for them, but FanDuel money's going to go on Alabama.
Okay, all right.
Maybe we get FanDuel to get you a sponsorship for this one or something.
Maybe, man. That'll be dope. And I'll make sure I'll be like, hey, I got to have my man with me on this. So, right, I recognize. So, we're getting into bowl season, right? So there's one I definitely have to ask you about. Although I'm going to give a quick plug. I am choosing South Carolina over UNC in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, right? Because I'm a South Carolina grad. I am choosing Texas Tech over Mississippi State because I also got my PhD from Texas Tech. And I am choosing ECU over Boston College because I did teach at ECU for 12 years in the Military Bowl, right? So I'm not going to ask you to pick those, even though we talked a little bit about it. But this one, I know where you're going. But I want to get your thoughts on Ohio State versus the Utah Utes. And what bowl are they playing in?
Rose Bowl.
Rose Bowl, right?
Yep. And it's not going to be a game. The game will be over at halftime. I'm going to say Buckeyes 42, Utes 13.
Oh, I love it. All right, so we got it here first. So what's really going to be dope is if you pick that damn score right on the money, everybody's going to be picking up the phone. They're like, yo, what you got for this one? What you got for this one?
Yeah. That'll never happen. That will never happen.
I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be a game, dude. I really don't think it's going to be a game. I think they're going to get scraped. I think Utah is going to get scraped. I don't even think it's going to be close. Ohio State this year looked really good. And it's funny because earlier we were talking about the former Ohio State coach and now the former Jags coach, right? Urban Meyer, great college coach, but he just showed how crappy of an NFL coach and actually crappy guy he actually is, dude.
I mean, he was a horrible person at Ohio State, too. Florida and Bowling Green and Utah. I mean, everywhere he's been, he's a horrible person. He's just a great college coach.
And it's nuts, I will say this, man. I don't know what the Jags were thinking. I felt like I knew he was not going to be successful at the pros. There was only one coach that I honestly thought, and this was kind of way back, and it's because I loved the University of Miami, but I was like, yeah, Jimmy Johnson's going to make the Cowboys a winner, right? I just felt it was going to happen. I was a big fan of the University of Miami in those days. But every time a college coach has made the move up to the pros, I'm like, this dude's going to be trash. So I will be one of the first ones to say I was surprised at Pete Carroll's success. Right?
Well, he was the head coach of the Patriots back in the early 90s.
Yes.
So the Seahawks weren't his first.
No, and also before that, he was with the Jets, right?
Yes.
So it wasn't the first go around. You are definitely correct in that. But there's just something about college coaches and like Saban, right? When everybody was like, "Oh, Saban's going to Miami," I was like, "Yeah, but he was a god at LSU." And the pros are not going to treat you like a god, man. Mm-hmm. It's just not going to happen. What you say doesn't go all the time. And that's why I just did not find the idea of Urban Meyer coming to Jacksonville. And that's just down the road for me. And that's the closest football I got. It's what we watch on Sundays. Me and my boys get together. And that's some of the most disheartening stuff to watch, man.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, welcome to the life of a Bills fan from 97 through 2018.
No, man, it's like, oh man, it's just god awful. And I feel that it's going to continue because a fish rots from the head down. And I feel it's the C-suite guys, the guys that are making decisions to get certain guys in place. I feel that GM is not that great. I feel other guys that make decisions for the organization, the owner, I feel is making bad decisions. Something's got to change with the Jag system. And I would love to see them be successful because it's only about a 45-minute trip up the road. I don't care if they're giving away tickets for $5. I have no desire because I'm wasting gas and time, man, to go watch a team that I know is going to lose, bro. I don't want to go do that. So, but so you got the Ohio State. What was it? 42-13? Was that
42-14?
42-14. I'm going to go ahead and write that down, man, because when it happens, I'm going to be like, yo, that is what's up. So as we wrap up, a little rant and rave with Dave, I want to get your final thoughts on today. I'm trying to think if there was anything else we had mentioned we might talk about. We talked about the playoffs. I think we got everything in.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Yeah, we hit on all the major talking points.
Man, and I tell you what, before I give you the stage to kind of give you a rant and rave, I just want to thank you for reaching out. This was great, right? I was taking that little break to just sit and talk about sports and be able just to have a fun, friendly conversation, man. I really appreciate you, Joel. Thank you so much for tuning for
anytime. I try not to take myself too seriously, and because if you can't laugh at yourself, you can't joke about yourself. I really don't want to be friends with you. So anytime you need a lighthearted conversation, hit me up. I'll dabble in the heavier stuff, but life's too short to stress.
It is. All right, so I'm going to ask you this, right, before we get – because we didn't talk about this. And the last time we had the conversation of the GOAT, right, do you still wholeheartedly feel Tom Brady's the GOAT?
Yeah.
Okay, just check it, right? No, the reason I said it because, now there's so many people talking trash. And I still don't think I think he's the greatest winner of all time, right, at the position. I still don't know just on pure – physical skill, like if he's like my guy as like greatest quarterback. But I tell you what, he's made a believer out of me when it comes to a lot of things, because when he went to Tampa Bay, I thought for sure this is it. Then he wins the Super Bowl, right, with Tampa Bay. And then this year I'm like, yeah, this will be it. And he's looking like he might get back to the Super Bowl again. Yeah. Even though they had that rough, people are talking trash about that rough game he had. Everybody can get one of those. The Saints were hyped. Like, it happens, right? I don't think that's a telltale sign that he's lost it. But they could go back to the damn Super Bowl, man. He could win another one. He could win an eighth, which would be crazy.
Yeah, he's the best quarterback ever. And it's Brady, a big gap, Peyton Manning, and then everybody else.
Dude, I love it. You didn't just say a gap. You were like, a big gap.
Yes.
No, that's cool, man. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. That's what makes America great. You're entitled to Brady being the GOAT, and I'm sure that there's a lot of conversations people have with you about his GOATness. But that's what makes sports fun, right? How do we know 100% for real? With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, the rant and rave with Dave. Joel, please give us your final thoughts on today's topic of conversation. Anything that you want to have or anything that you want to discuss.
Just, with the holiday season coming up, well, I guess when we watch this, it'll be over, but, with 2022 coming up, just like I said last time, just be kind, don't be a Barry Bonds. Don't be an asshole. Be a Roberto Clemente.
Man, I love it.
Just be kind to everyone. And actually, today at work, our director had said that she's taking the approach for 2022 as either hell yes or hell no. If you're going to do something, are you going to do this? Hell yes, I'm going to do it. Do you want to do this? Hell yes, I want to do it. Do you not want to do it? Hell no. Either be all in or don't do it at all. Don't dip your toes in. And, getting some brownie points for work right now, but, I liked it.
Yeah. That's what's up. Hey, man, I tell you, that's why I love our conversations, man. I love how you tied it, everything you said. Don't be a Barry Bonds, be a Roberto Clemente. I love it, man. That's awesome. I wish everybody a happy, healthy, and safe rest of your holiday season. I hope your new year is an amazing and great new year. And like you said, man, let's not take ourselves too seriously. Let's have a good time enjoying life. Be kind to others. Treat everybody with dignity and respect. Right? Let's start to put some of these differences aside and just try and live the best life that we can. Joel, thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to our part 3, hopefully sometime soon. Yeah. We may have to get back together and talk about post-bowl games and just chop it up, right? So we might have to do that. So
could me, you, and Ed, because I got some. I lived with Ed at Frostburg, and I got some dirt on Ed McGinley that
We could do the Ed McGinley show.
yeah, I got some dirt. I'll give you one little nugget here. It was a Friday. His car was blocked, parked me in. I go down to his room and said, "Hey, Ed, could you move your car? I need to go to class." Ed had a lot of Pepsi the night before, and he just take my keys. And I got the good parking because he was doing his grad assistant or graduate work there. So I got the good parking for the day. I was living large. Got parked right next to the door. But man, do I got some stories about Ed.
Oh, we're gonna have to maybe have an Ed McGinley show. That's what's up. But Joel, thank you again. Hope everybody has a great night. And remember, roll the dice with Dave. Like, share, subscribe. Let's be the change we want to see in the world. Hope everybody has a good night and see you.